Here's how women operate. Women operate with human behavior, which can be categorized into sexual and sexually provisional behavior. Here's what you must understand about each term. What is a woman? A woman is a human, and a human is defined by a process, and this process is colloquially known as evolution. Here's an example of this process. Suppose there is a group of humans. One group has sex and they have children. Those children will inherit the traits of the group who has had sex with a few mutations, and the group who has not had sex will not have any children. So the new generation of humans will be defined by those who have had sex. When those children grow up and they also have their own children, this will continue the process of what defines a human. So a human's behavior helps them reproduce or helps those who are genetically similar to them to reproduce. And this behavior can be categorized into sexual behavior and sexually provisional behavior. Sexual behavior encompasses sexually provisional behavior. And so sexually provisional behavior is sexual behavior. But there is a distinction made colloquially between these two behaviors, and so this video will maintain that colloquial distinction so you can understand the video. Sexual behavior by a woman involves intercourse between the woman and other men for her children's genetics. Her behaviors will influence the men who are able to have sex with her, and so her children get the genetics that she prefers. So how does she determine who to have sex with for these genetics? Studies and research can provide you with answers to traits that women may prefer, but traits that women prefer are ultimately driven by the process we described earlier in the video. The most important thing to understand is that when a woman wants to have sex, she wants to have sex with the men who fit her genetic profile, and how she has sex is largely dependent on a lot of factors. The factor we focus on first is emotions, because emotions help humans reproduce. And so what are the emotions that a woman feels when it comes to sex? You may argue that a woman and a man are not much different when it comes to genetics, other than their environments. Internally, a man has sperm and a woman has eggs, and externally there is the difference in resources available and other cultural expectations. The most significant researched environmental difference is the ovulation cycle, which affects how a woman feels horny. Studies show a woman finds multiple men sexually attractive during her ovulation cycle, which is also when she is most likely to feel horny spontaneously. The men she finds attractive tend to be dominant, and when she is having sex with these men, she is more likely to orgasm when these men are dominant. You can combine this information with the fact that a woman tends to last longer than a man until orgasm, and the man's instrument shape as well as his technology for sperm competition to reach a hypothesis where a woman who is acting on her emotions and solely her emotions would be having sex with multiple men during her ovulation cycle. These actions result in her becoming pregnant with a child from a dominant man, and let's define what dominance is before moving on to sexually provisional behaviors. Studies often define dominance by relating them to traits with assertiveness and getting what you want. This video defines dominance by relating it to the evolutionary processes earlier in the video. A dominant man likely does get what he wants, and this is related to his genetics and his environment. His genetics should let him acquire enough food and also defend it from other men, and also work with men such that he is able to maintain security over the resources and his tribe. The difference in strength between humans, and specifically human males, is not that significant when you compare those differences to the relative strength of, say, another animal. It does not take a lot of humans to overpower another human, and even the strongest men in the world cannot overpower, let's say, 20 toddlers. So social interaction is a large part of your dominance and being sexually attractive. Women who prefer traits like these, which result in you succeeding in your environment, are more likely to have children with traits that also succeed in their environment over women who are selecting for traits that are not selected. And while there are other ways for a woman to have sex without selecting the male, the same concept still applies. Sexually provisional behaviors refer to how a woman provides for herself and her children when it comes to sleep, shelter, food, so on and so forth. And she does this by expressing her emotions in relationships. This video does not define relationships by using the colloquial definition of relationships such as boyfriend and girlfriend, but rather every relationship, such as her relationship with her siblings, parents, grandparents, co-workers, acquaintances, friends, and so on. How these relationships operate depend on their context, with the exception of her relationship to her child. The child is the dominant person in the relationship, and she aims to serve the child whenever the child expresses their emotions. You will be provided with examples of the behaviors identified in this video. This video does not apply shame to any of the identified behaviors and provides them as is. How men and women view the role of a boyfriend may differ. Men tend to value the role of a boyfriend as the man who is having sex with a woman, whereas a woman tends to value the provision that the boyfriend provides. This assertion holds true when a woman has sex outside of the relationship during her ovulation cycle and is surprised when the boyfriend does not want to raise a child which may or may not be his. To her, the role of him as a boyfriend is to provide her security, food, shelter, and be her friend, whereas to him, the role for him as a boyfriend is to be the father of her child genetically, which involves sex. This action becomes paternity fraud when she does this without telling the man, and then the man ends up raising a child that he thinks is his, but is not. You must understand that there is no way to guarantee the certainty of the child's father historically. So a woman who has had sex with multiple men may want a specific man to be her father figure for her child, but that does not mean that is the child's father. However, the concept of paternity fraud historically makes less sense when you consider that the tribe is helping the woman raise her child rather than simply one man. A woman is willing to have sex with men she does not intend to genetically procreate with in exchange for resources, and this is proven historically and in the modern day. You may make the argument that a man in a tribe would not provide to a woman who he has not had sex with, but women do have sex with men that they're not genetically procreating with. You have to remember that women can have sex that does not result in genetic procreation, and that generally their preferences for mates shift based on their ovulation cycle. Women on birth control tend to prefer men who are more provisional for this reason, because when women are not able to conceive, they tend to prefer more provisional partners, which is more evidence showing how women can use sex in order to achieve provisions. States which provide welfare or reward women for being women with provisions tend to see less interaction between women and provisional males. So these states fill the provisional role for the woman, so she does not have to interact with men who would fill the provisional role for her. In the ideal situation, she is solely focused on her children and her sexual preference mates, whereas everyone else is simply functioning to help provide for these people.